Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is John's reports for the 23rd of September. And like we talked about the other day, the short-term buyers here on the DOC started to pop up, and this is enough to start seeing some basing from the long-term buyers here on the red DOC. And that cross above shorts, cyan right there, was enough back here that it started to hold the support. And then, of course, at the 38, that gave incentive as we were pushing forward. And so that's what we're seeing. Again, we never dipped below the red line on the S&P and the NASDAQ. We had a little bit less on that extreme. It was even better than we were seeing on the S&P, and I said the NASDAQ would lead it. And, of course, their shakeout is much more improved. Likewise, we're getting the uptick in power mode with the crossover and a much stronger short-term buyer along with the green crossing red. So, as I said before, the NASDAQ would lead it out, and that's exactly how that played out. So spot on with there. And again, that gives a little bit of buoyance to gold. The U.S. looks like they're going to pass at least a temporary budget, so there won't be a shutdown. That's a positive sign. That will actually help gold out, at least maintain a baseline here. But again, this is just filling all these positive extremes from back here, which we talked about before. Nothing shocking there. And again, with the Eurozone, the potential for lockdowns again in some areas and just a disruption in what would be normal travel. Certainly going to have enough of an impact. But right here, hitting the 50%, still below the red line, so that may not be enough to help it. And not really seeing a whole lot other than just some tiny short-term buyer support at that 50%. Hasn't even gotten anywhere near getting above the short cyan on the DOC. And from an oil standpoint, just maintaining itself right there, so potential is that things could still be okay. Right now, in the post-market, post-market and pre-market and before the actual open here, we're right at that previous algo, 33.12, kind of supported off there and bounced above. And the other range obviously is down to the 32.85, and we had some pretty decent moves above it. And again, we ended up with more positive extremes right around that area. I mean, the first initial one took place exactly at the same spot. So they're just using the same spots to attach and continue the same moves. From an intraday standpoint, it was mostly elevated. We stayed in a pretty tight zone up at the high end of it, but we still had back and forth. I mean, these are still excellent ranges. Every time we're getting, DOC spreads, a little harder to see with that. Let's see if I have the power mode 2. I think maybe activated on. Go to our inputs, make sure. If you turn SIG alert on, it reduces it to cap out at the 45 level, so it doesn't take up too much space. And bingo, it pops back up with a little bit less volume in the range, but going back to it, we can see clearly we've stayed in a soft mode here as you end up not getting that DOC red back over the zero when it starts to roll over, and then this cyan continues to move above. We had plenty of resets on them, so every time they came down to the lows, crossed above, and then you ended up with corresponding power mode 2s. Gave opportunity for new buy opportunities, as we see with each of those. And cyan under red was always the buy that stayed all the way through to the end. And right before the close there, we ended up getting that last DOC spread that led to a little back and forth for the day break session. And kind of supported back and forth throughout that. It was just a slow build. And once the DOC red got above the negative 13 and then continued to push forward, and green got above cyan there, that was clear that we were headed more towards the upper end of the range. And that's where we finished out for now. Still looking pretty good. We're above that 33.12. That's going to be the defining point. But should we break that under any kind of weakness, we know that we're going all the way back to the 85, so that would be a pretty decent range intraday to be able to play with. So all in all, market's reacting fairly much on cue. Despite all the general turmoil that's taking place in the politics and everything else. So it's just another day, and markets keep plugging away at it. So we'll just stick with it and keep following along. As always, though, I'll put anything relevant on the Skype chat. Trade well.